Now in order to do that, we're gonna. What should be obvious is we're gonna have to figure out the tkufa in relation to the molad. Then we already know how to figure out a molad, so when we figure out a molad, we'll be able to figure out the tkufa. Because the only way we can figure out the tkufa is by how much it is before or after a specific molad. So when we do that, we'll be able to figure out the molad. Okay? So, and then when we do that, we can figure out what night of the week it is and what day of the month it is. Now, we're going to start with the tkufa of Rav Ada. Now, like I mentioned, each one of them has their advantages and disadvantages and how to figure it out. Now, even though we're going to start, even though the tkufa of Rav Ada is not really the tkufa that we have any practical use for, because even though the tkufa of Rav Ada is not really the tkufa we're going to have any practical use for, because the tkufa of Rav Ada is really never mentioned in the Talmud any place. It's not mentioned in the Talmud. It's a tkufa really that functions for one reason. It functions for the 19-year cycle, right? That is the tkufa that actually enables the 19-year cycle to be perfect. Okay? So, outside of that, knowing the actual date for the tkufa of Rav Ada is not as practical as knowing the actual date for the tkufa of Shmuel, because when the Gemara talks about a tkufa, it's really talking about the tkufa of Shmuel. But like I said, being the fact that the tkufa of Rav Ada is closer and more accurate to the one that we know, to the true tkufa that we have today, that we know based scientifically, and second, it's a little bit easier, and it is of course the basis for this 19-year cycle.
What constitutes a tkufa scientifically?
The tkufa scientifically we know is, as I said,
what constitutes it? What happens in a tkufa scientifically?
Well, there are 4 tkufot, as we said. There's the 2 equinoxes and 2 solstices.
How do you know when they are?
How do scientists know when this?
What constitutes it? What's the definition of it? What's the scientific definition of a season?
Of a season?
Yeah.
It's, well, each season is different, but let's talk about what constitutes the beginning. The beginning of a season, as we said 2 times ago, when the sun's rays are hit on the equator, that's the beginning of the spring and or fall season respectively. Right. When the sun's rays hit its highest point, which is north, which is at 23.5 approximately.
So it's the highest point that it hits.
Right, that's already the first day of summer, and the first day of winter is when it hits the lowest point, 23.5 south, below the equator. That's basically, and the whole thing is basically the sun's movement on the ecliptic, which is, equator, north, equator, south, back to equator, and that's pretty much how the seasons go, and it's all based it's all relevant because, not because of the distance of the Earth to the sun, but because of the tilt of the Earth on its axis, how it's tilted. There's an interesting sforno, which is contradicted by many other Rishonim and really by some Marot. But Sforno wants to say that the seasons are a result of the post-Mabu. But initially, the earth was supposed to be no tilt, and therefore every day would have been like the first day of spring.
Right. So what's wrong with that pshat?
There's a lot of stirot on that pshat, and many Rishonim clearly don't explain it. But that's the sforno.
Does the latitude longitude ever change? That the sun moves around, or does the tilt of the earth change a little bit, or no? It's always the same.
Well, not that I think it's pretty much the same.
Well, they said that the earthquakes the seismic earthquakes that actually changed the speed of the rotation of the Earth. Sometimes like it either slowed it, or let's say it altered the angle by, let's say, like 0.0, when they'd had like the one in Haiti, and then when they had
that means that altered the tilt of the axis, or
I'm not sure which one, but it definitely, I think they said the day. I mean, it because of it affected something that now the day became X amount of nanoseconds shorter or longer.
right? So that
Because
would
of
affect,
the because
if that's
of the
the case,
earthquake.
then it would affect the speed of the
So
rotation.
the speed of the rotation, but
Right, it
because
wouldn't
of
change the seasons; it would affect the
seismic
speed of the
activity,
rotation.
actually affected the in recent what happened once like 7 years ago, and then also when it happened.
Right.
So the earthquake actually it either like it pauses it or
Right. Then that would be the rotation, not the power. Interesting. Okay. So, all right. In order to find out, so let's start with the Tkufa of Rabbi. So, in order to know so I'm going to tell you what we need to know, what we need to do, and then we'll do one or two examples. In order to find the Tkufa of Rabbi, the first thing we need to know is that the year that the Tkufa is in that we're looking, we need to know what year is it in the Mahzor Katan. What year? Now, before I continue, I want to ask you, is it going to be relevant how many Mahzorim have passed for Rabbi? Will that be relevant? Why not? Because there's no because it's repetitive, it's fixed. So every 19-year cycle it repeats itself vis-a-vis the Molad, because it's perfect. So Lefi Rabbi, I don't care how many Mahzorim have passed. I only want to know. First thing I want to know is the year in the Mahzor. Right? Shana b'Mahzor. Then, the next thing I want to know is how many Tufot have passed. Now, once I know the Shana b'Mahzor Katan, really, I can now assess how many Tufot have passed since Tkufat Nisan, not Tishrei, Tkufat Nisan, in that Mahzor. So that's the next thing I'm going to need to know.
The first one of that, the first Tikufat Nisan.
Correct. Kama Tkufot Avru Mitkufat Nisan Harishon. Okay?
מה זה הראשון?
Of that Mahzor.
that much.
Then, I multiply the number in number 2. I multiply the amount of Tkufot by Bet Yud Zayin Shin Lamed Aleph. שני ימים, י"ז שעות, 300 חלקים, למד א' רגעים. Okay? I multiply that out. Alright? I then subtract. Right? I subtract from that number. I subtract Tet Sha'ot Tarma B'Halakim. Why? Why would I do that?
because that's the
That is the amount of time that the first kufa happened before the first molad. Okay? So then I'm going to subtract that. And then I compute, and I'm going to explain logic for all of these. How many Sod Haibbur passed from that I take how many Hodshei Ibur passed till the Tkufa that I need in that Mahzor. Okay, how many Hodshei Ibur? I multiply that number, let's say it's 3, 4, however many Hodshei Ibur. I multiply that number by Katyab Tashsad. Okay?
How many Chodshei Haibbur passed in the Mahzor or in the Shana?
Huh? In the Mahzor.
In the Mahzor, in the whole
Yeah.
Mahzor?
I multiply by Katyab Tashsad. I take that product, okay? I subtract the number I got in 5 from the number I have in 4. Okay? Subtract. We're going to do this to make it, I'm just telling you, I subtract number 5 from number 4. Okay?
So in each stage we're just leaving the numbers there and then we're using them later?
Yeah.
They don't come
Yeah. If number 5 is greater than 4, okay? Let's say I said I'm going to subtract number 5 from number 4. It's possible, and it will happen 1 out of 3 times, approximately 1 out of 3 times, that number 5 will be greater than number 4. So what should you do? That all that means is that the tkufa is going to be, let's say I'm looking for tkufat Nisan and whatever, that's going to be before the molad of Nisan, meaning it's going to be in Adar. So what I'll do is, if this happens, if 5 is greater than 4, all you need to do is we're going to now compare it not to the molad of Nisan, but to the molad of Adar. So take 1 month away from 5. Remove 1 Katyab Tashsad. Right? Remove 1 month. 1 Ibud month. And we'll compute it from the prior month. You understand what I just said?
Yeah, minus
Okay, that's what we're going to do. Alright. When I do that, what I now have is this number is I don't know when the tkufa is yet. But then, what I do know is how it's going to be relevant to the molad. The number in number 7, I add it to the molad of that month. Okay? I add it to the molad. When I add it to the molad, now I have the first number that I'm going to actually use. Okay? This, until now, what we have is what we call an ihor tkufa. Now, if I want to find the day of the week of the tkufa, I'm not yet interested. The first thing, what I then do is, after I add it to the molad,
so all this up until now was time of day.
Yeah.
Okay.
I add to the molad. What I then do is, I remove the 7s, right? And I compute all of the, and merge together all of the halakim and the sha'ot like we've always done for molad. Remove the 7s, right? And mitzaref halakim sha'ot, and here you also have rega'im. And then I'll get the day of the week. The day of the week, but I won't get the day of the month yet. Okay? If I want the day of the month, I gotta now take this number with the 7s in it again. So I don't want to remove the 7s for the day of the month. Now I already know the day of the week. Okay? So I need to find, this number is not going to give me the day of the month. This number is only going to be relevant from the molad. So what I now have to do is find from Rosh Chodesh. So the next thing I need to do is find the Rosh Chodesh for that month, which we know how to do. Right? We know how to find the molad and we know how to find Rosh Chodesh. But for this purposes, you may want to just look in a calendar, but if you don't have a calendar, we already know how to compute Rosh Chodesh. Right? We know how to compute Rosh Chodesh for any month. So you find Rosh Chodesh for that month. Now, here's the funny thing. If the Rosh Chodesh, right, is on any day of the week, what you have to do is you have to now subtract the day of Rosh Chodesh. Let's say Rosh Chodesh is on Tuesday. You have to subtract the amount of days from Saturday night till Rosh Chodesh. So if Rosh Chodesh is on Tuesday, you're going to actually subtract. You're going to subtract 2 days. If Aleph is on Tuesday, you're going to subtract 2 days from this, and that's going to be the day of the Tkufa. Why do you have to do that? Very simply. When I have a molad, the molad tells me how many days past Saturday night the molad is, correct? If I didn't add the number to the molad, right? Let's say I didn't do this, number 8. I didn't add the number to the molad. What I basically had what's called the Ihoda Tkufa. I basically have how much after that molad of that month, right? How much is the Tkufa? Right? So I can figure the Tkufa, right? But so if I have the molad, I want to know this number is how many days after the molad is the tkufa. But I don't want to know how many days after the molad is the tkufa. I want to know how many days after Rosh Chodesh is the tkufa. So I could do that in one of 2 ways. Well, I could take the molad, this is a little more complicated, take Rosh Chodesh, subtract the difference of the two, take that number out of here, and then say, oh, this Ihod is now X amount of days after Rosh Chodesh. But an easy way to do is, instead of doing it that, I add the number to the molad. So now the molad is in my new number. And now, what did that do? That gave me how many days, not the tkufa is after the molad, but how many days the tkufa is after the Saturday night before the molad. Then, that's the new number I have, because I added the molad into it, so the molad is only, based from that Saturday night, right, because it's always up the week. I added that, right? Now, I have this number. I just need to find out how many days Rosh Chodesh is after that Saturday night, subtract that number, and now I know exactly what day of the week the tkufa is going to be on. One extra point, and then we'll do an example. If the molad was on a Shabbat,
then you're not subtracting.
and the Rosh Chodesh was on a Sunday or a Monday, which is possible, then I have to subtract not 1 or 2 days. I have to subtract, because the molad is from the previous, so I have to now subtract 8 days for Sunday.
Is it easier to add?
And 9 days. Well, this is how we do it: 8 days for Sunday, and 9 days if it was on a Monday.
Yeah, well.
Okay. All right. We're gonna try and do one now. We could do more than one, but these are the rules. This is the procedure. It's a little bit more involved than molad. There's a lot more steps, but
Could you explain 3 and 4?
if you take it once, I'll explain it all. If you take it one step at a time, if you take it one step at a time, you get there. Okay? So it's a 10, 11 step process. Again, remember, as tricky as it sounds, we're only using addition and subtraction. We're not using any... No, we're using
Multiplication.
We're using multiplication. But that's it. So, the molad was on a Shabbat, and Rosh Chodesh was on a Sunday or Monday. Then the Rosh Chodesh, we've already added the 7 days. So the Rosh Chodesh now is theoretically a day and a week and a day, or a week and 2 days after what we're completing. So we have to subtract now 8 or 9 days from Ma'ih Haramolah.
And it's on Saturday, subtract 7?
In other words, okay?
So wouldn't step 8 come first? We should figure out our molad first.
No, you're going to need to know.
And just keep it in the back.
You want to know the molad to the day of the week.
Right, what I'm saying.
So that's 9.
Bottom line, you're going to have to calculate your molad.
Yeah. Okay. So now you want to. Okay. I'll go over all the steps again, and then after I go over the steps again, I will.
We'll get like time to work it out.
We'll work one out together.
That's right.
We'll work one out together, and then depending on the time we have left, we'll either work another one together, or I'll give you one to do at home, and then we'll work. Okay.
Rabbi, this is all according to Rabbi.
This is all Rabbi. We're gonna have this. We're gonna have another a different computation how to figure it out with the
So do we use
A lot of the same formulas will happen, just the numbers inserted are gonna be.
Do we use this practically? I thought we said we don't
Again,
use
really, Rabbi is in terms of knowing the actual tkufa, there's not really much of a use.
What is the use?
What?
Yes.
What
have
is
to do
the
it.
use that we do?
We'll try to.
We're not
Yeah.
really. We don't really use.
I know why I
tkufa.
ask you the question. Yes.
We
yes.
don't really use the tkufa of Rabbi for anything other than justifying the 19-year cycle. In other words, that's really what we do. By the way, which is very important, because that's all the holidays we have is based on that cycle. So the tkufa of Rabbi justifies that cycle. When the word tkufa is mentioned in the Gemara, it's referring to tkufat Shmuel, which is a different computation. Again, the process seems to be the same. The numbers entered will be different. Okay, so knowing this, it'll be easier, not 100% easier, but it will get you on the road to also knowing tkufat Shmuel. But again, there will be much more usage for the tkufa of Shmuel than for the tkufa of Rabbi. Okay? Because, as I mentioned, the tkufa of Rabbi is, like I said, is basically the justification of the 19-year cycle. It is never mentioned in the Talmud as a tkufa. It's never mentioned. So, when we talk about tkufot in the Talmud, we talk about tkufa of Shmuel. Okay, so let's go back. So the first thing I do, again, I don't need to know how many mahzorim passed at all. I don't care about that. Because the 6th year in the mahzor of the 300th mahzor and the 200th mahzor is the exact same thing. So I ignore how many mahzorim passed, and I just find the actual year in the mahzor. So I only care about the remainder now. I don't care about the quotient. I then find how many tkufot pass from the first Nisan in that mahzor. Okay.
Is that why you skipped Tishri and Tevet on the last chart?
Yeah, that's why I did it. Even though that was for Shmuel, but that was why I did it. That's exactly the reason. Because we're actually operating from that Nisan. Okay?
You counted though, right, Rabbi, the first one?
What?
Nisan counts?
Nisan counts, but not the ones of that year before. Tishrei of that year and Tevet of that year doesn't count. Okay? I get this number.
Didn't we do Mahzor Gadol?
No, Mahzor Gadol is not relevant for Rabbi B'chlal.
Isn't
There's
that-
no
isn't
such
that
thing
what
as a
the
Mahzor
chart?
Gadol. Yes, that was, and that's why it's only for Shmuel. That I just want to show you what a Mahzor Gadol is. We'll go back to the Mahzor Gadol. We'll get back to Shmuel. There is no such thing, the Fi Tkufat Rabbi as a Mahzor Gadol. Doesn't exist. Right? That Mahzor Gadol only works the Fi Tkufat Shmuel. Okay. Now, for every Tkufat, I take this amount in number 2, and I multiply it by 2 days, 17 hours, 300 halakim, and 31 regaim. That's an involved multiplication.
Rabbi, so how many Regaim are in a Chelik? I missed it the last time.
76.
76.
All right. By the way, did anyone wasn't here last time get the sheet? Let me give that. It's just important background information to understand what we're talking about. Okay. I just put together a sheet with some basic info. Who didn't get the sheet? Okay. All right. So all these numbers will come clear because from last time. So I multiply the amount of tukufot by this number. I take that number and I subtract 9 sha'ot and tabma halakim.
How many
The reason-
halakim?
642. Okay? Which is, right, and why did I do that number? On your sheet you'll notice why I took that number. Because that's the number,
It always falls before the
according
moment.
to the Rabbi, that the first kufa was before the Molad al-Levana in history. So I always have to subtract that.
Can you repeat that?
That's the number that the first kufa of creation, that kufa happened that amount of hours and halakim before the first molad in history. So it is true that the cycle comes back perfect, but they never started together. So since they never started together, I have to account for that number by subtracting it from my ihod.
It's like the Bahrad of Molad.
Well, okay.
Is that this calculation is
You wanna
in the Shas? Shas says that this coincidence.
The Tkufa of Rabbi doesn't have the Shas.
So how do you know that that's?
You know the Tkufa of Rabbi comes. We get the Tkufa of Rabbi from assuming that the 19-year cycle is perfect. When we assume the 19-year cycle is perfect, we then recreate. That's what I did last time. We then recreated Tkufa based on that, right? Based on the 19-year cycle, which is 235 months, multiplying 235 times Katiyab Tashsag, dividing that number by 76, and that creates a Tkufa.
And how do you also get that the first molad didn't happen at the same time as the first?
That's just a masoret that we have according to the Rabbi and according to Shmuel. We'll see the two different numbers. Okay. So now, after I did,
What's the point number 3?
Point of number 3 is I want to take the amount of tefillot. This is the number that every tkufa exceeds every 3 lunar months. Okay? Now, there's one problem with just assuming this, is that this would be fine if every year, if every one tkufa was relevant to 3 lunar months, and every 4 tkufot was relevant to 12 lunar months. But we already know that every now and then we had a 13th lunar month in there, and that's not covered here. That's why we're going to have to cover it later. So we take these tkufot, multiply it by this number, subtract this, and leave number 4 on the side for a short time. We put that number aside. Okay. Then I go look at how many Sod Haibbur passed. So, if I'm from the time of that mahzor, how many shanim me'ubarot passed, and each shana me'uberet has 1 Chodesh Haibbur. I take that Chodesh Haibbur, multiply it by the entire lunar cycle, which is Katiyab Tashsag. I subtract that. And again, the logic is, because this is only how much the tkufa is larger than 3 lunar months. And that means that 4 tkufot equals 12 lunar months. That doesn't include the Sod Haibbur, which is the years that have 13 lunar months. So I have to include that by subtracting it. And then, when I subtract number 5 from number 4, I keep that number. If, however, number 5 is greater than number 4 and therefore can't be subtracted by number 4, I go back, I take out 1 Chodesh Haibbur, and then know that I'm figuring it out based on its prior month. So I'm figuring out Tkufat Nisan based on the Molad of Adar, because Tkufat Nisan will not be in Nisan, it will be at the end of Adar. Because all that means is that in this year, or for that tkufa, the molad is after the tkufa. Okay? I then take that number, add it to the molad, and like I said, you could do this differently. You could do it the other way. I think this is just the way we normally do it. And again, the way Shirei David recommends to do it. I add it to the molad. Now, in order to find the day of the week, that's easy. I would do as I would do a molad, remove all sevens, mechaber halakim regaim, mechaber regaim to halakim to sha'ot to yamim, knock out the sevens, and then I have the day of the week of the tkufa, but I don't have the day of the month. So the day of the month, I go back to this number.
Put the sevens back.
I go back to this number, which has the sevens in it. I then it depends. Then I figure out the where Rosh Chodesh is of the tkufa that I'm interested in. I take the amount of days of that Rosh Chodesh is in that week. I subtract the days that of that week prior to that Rosh Chodesh. If the molad was on Shabbat and Rosh Chodesh is on a Sunday or Monday, I subtract the prior week and the days. So for Sunday I will subtract 8. For Monday I will subtract 9. Okay? And then I subtract it for that number, and that will be the exact day, hour, Helik and Rega of your Tkufa. Tkufat Ravada. Okay? Are we ready to, any questions? Are we ready to do an example?
Just one question. So, and the Tukufot, according to Ravada, they also repeat? Meaning there's only X amount of possible Tukufot?
Well, no, they don't repeat, because the only thing that
it's based on Molad, so that's
based
why.
on Molad, and because the Molad fluctuates. So look,
so obviously this will
Kufat
fluctuate.
Nisan this year will not be the same day
in 19 years from now.
Kufat Nisan 19 years from now.
Okay, I'm just saying.
But it'll be the exact same amount of time before or after the Molad of Nisan as it was.
Okay, that makes sense. So in relation to the Molad, it's
relation to the
perfect, but the
Molad,
actual Molad is going to
right.
fluctuate. It's going to
It will fluctuate, right? Kufat will fluctuate. Okay. All right. We're ready to do an example. Yeah.
That's right.
Okay. So let's get together, and we'll do one together. Keep this on your mind. We're gonna